morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see you here today. I'm glad you're with us. I'm back, and do I know what I'm doing? That's the big question. We always have a few challenges on the first day back, and here we see what we're up against. I see some chats coming through here, and so looks like perhaps things are working. Hope that you had a wonderful Thanksgiving and that you still fit in your clothes and all that kind of stuff, and that it was good seeing friends and family perhaps, or just having a little day of relaxation for those of you who are in the United States, of course. Those of you who are in Canada or England or Belgium or the Netherlands or wherever it is, you just had Thursday. We had Thanksgiving, and it was nice. So great to see everybody, and very glad you are here. Just checking out. We got Arizona here. We got Lexington here. Ontario is here with us. Thanks for being here. We got Corsicana, Texas. Good to see you. Got Grand Rapids, Michigan. Welcome. Good to see you. We got Oklahoma and Mississippi. Good to see all of you here. There's Lessines, Belgium. Good to see you. Got a little Missouri going on, and some Kansas. We got some Arkansas. We got some Texas. Saying our long drought is over. Do you remember, Scott? I don't know your age, but I suspect you're old enough to remember. Our long national nightmare is over. Remember that? Did anybody remember who that is? Roger and Carol are in the live studio audience today, and it's Carol's 39th birthday. Happy birthday, Carol. Glad that you're here. This is the Feenstra from Fresno who are with us here. Roger and Carol, do you remember the long national nightmare is over? They were probably, I don't know, raising kids or something. Rochester, New York. Mickey, good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Always glad to have some new ones. You're close, Oslo, but it was not Carter. But you are close. You are very close. But no cigar, as they say somewhere. I don't know where they say that. Where do they say close but no cigar? Is that related to something? We don't know.
The same guy.
Maybe the same guy who said our long national nightmare is over. I think let's see if we can just find it here. And yeah, there we go. Here, yes. Oops. I don't think I have the sound up. Okay, I don't think the sound's coming through there, but it was Gerald Ford right after. It was when I think it was in his inaugural address when Nixon resigned, and he declared it to be over. Although, just recently a book has come out, and all of the not all, but a great deal of the papers have now been opened up after 50 years. And it turns out the special counsel was a crook. That he did so many things illegally. Honestly, he would go to jail and spend the rest of his life in prison. And basically, it was a coup brought about by the special prosecutor and the Democrats. Read the book. I'll have to remember what the name of the book is, but it reminds me. Just recently, I don't know, has there been talk, or there has actually been a special counsel brought about? I don't trust him for 3 seconds, not a bit. Because they really can work things in order to only present the evidence they want to present in order to make it a guilty case, wrapped up in the bag. There it is. But anyway, Linda was not born yet. That's why she guessed Reagan. But anyway, Carol, there's a light switch right above your head, and it will be your job during the time that you are here every day to turn that light switch off. Go for it right now. And that one right there. You got it. There we go. Okay. Now, I always forget to do that till the broadcast is going, and then I'm like, Nathan, you should put a switch here on my desk for that one, because I forget it every day. Okay, you would like to get into some questions, wouldn't you? And I don't know. I'm thinking I should dig back and find Linda's question here. Is it here somewhere? Because she's taken over and under bets on whether or not I answer the question. Oh, there it is. Linda, just because you are being you had perspicuity. I don't even know what that means. But because of that, I am going to answer your question today because it is old. And then I'm going to get into the other questions. Like I'll take Rudy's question here right away. I'll start from the bottom this time. Sometimes when they get old, I start from the bottom because the rest of you forgot you had a question anyway. By the time we got around to it, and so we will do that. Okay, we're going to try to record a television program. We'll see how successful we are. Again, I was on vacation and back after that long national nightmare, and here we are ready to go. So let's see if everything works, and we'll start with Linda's question in the television program, and I will make sure I got Biblify all up and running. There we go. I'll be right back, theoretically, in about 15 seconds. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Randy White, and this is Ask the Theologian, and we're ready to take your biblical, theological, and worldview questions, and happy to do so. And our desire is to rightly divide the word of truth, as we're instructed to do in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15. You can submit your questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at askthetheologian.com. And we start today with a question that comes from Linda in Lexington. And the question is about the disciples or the apostles, the 12, about whether they were saved to the kingdom or were they eventually saved under grace. You may remember that we often have this poster that we bring about, and it talks about the kingdom gospel and the individual gospel, the prophetic gospel and the mystery gospel, the apostolic gospel and the Pauline gospel, a number of ways that we could do that, and that there was a time of transition that we find in the book of Acts, and that is reflected, of course, in some of the epistles as well. And so the question is, the 12 apostles, were they saved to this gospel or were they saved to this Pauline gospel? Now, I am going to say, first of all, that, and I'll say this in a way that sounds a little bit shocking. Nobody ever was nor has yet been saved under this gospel. The reason is that this gospel has a salvation which only comes in the end when Messiah comes. When Messiah comes, there will be a judgment, and those who survive the judgment will enter into the kingdom, and they will be saved then by the standards of the kingdom gospel. So all salvation for the kingdom gospel is future. That means that those under this gospel were not, absent from the body and present with the Lord. Let's take John the Baptist, for example. When he lost his head, did he immediately go into what today you and I would call heaven, or let's just say to be with the Lord? To be absent from the body is to be present from the Lord. Well, he became absent from the body, but I don't think that he went immediately into the Lord's presence. Rather, he went to Sheol or paradise or Abraham's bosom, and there he waits for the resurrection and for the judgment that will bring him the salvation of the kingdom, salvation of the full person, the body and the soul or the spirit and the mind, all the things there is about the person. He will be saved there in the future. So kingdom salvation is a future salvation. The apostles were living under kingdom salvation. They were teaching kingdom salvation, and they were obeying the requirements of kingdom salvation. Now, here comes the kicker of the question. During this time of the transition, were those apostles, and some of them were alive, not James the apostle, for example, of Peter, James, and John fame. That James died before Paul ever came along. Some of the others we're not real sure about. Of course, we know that John lived even well after where I've got the end of the transition at 70 AD. And that is our assumption by tradition anyway. Now, with that, during this transition, or even afterwards, were these apostles saved under Paul's gospel so that they knew as soon as they were absent from the body, they were going to be present with the Lord, and that they could, sing as we sometimes do, and I mention this song fairly often, my life now is sweet and my joy is complete, for I'm saved, saved, saved. Could they sing that song? I don't think John the Baptist could sing that song. He could say, I'm living according to the kingdom way, I'm walking the king's highway, I'm doing the things according to the law. I am going to endure to the end and be saved. Now, I think that the apostles, let's take James out because we know he died, but let's assume the rest of them live even past the collapse of Jerusalem. We assume probably Peter did because likely he wrote 1st and 2nd Peter after the fall or the destruction of Jerusalem, so he's living out here. Was he saved? I think so. I think he was saved under the grace gospel, under the Pauline gospel that was in effect at that time. I think there was this little period of transition or overlap in which a person like Peter could be recipients of both salvations. You and I are not a recipient of the kingdom salvation because, honestly, the kingdom has nothing to do with us. We'll never inherit the kingdom. We may be in the kingdom just as servants of the king, but we will not be part of the government. We will not be part of the inheritance. We will not be part of the rooms prepared, as Jesus talked about in John 14, to the apostles. That is kingdom stuff, and that belongs to them. Our salvation is the grace salvation of Paul. Now, how can you have both? As a matter of fact, I would suspect even the Apostle Paul has both. For the Apostle Paul, he is a Jew, first of all, and the kingdom salvation is only to the nation of Israel. He's a Jew. He's being obedient to the kingdom regulations. He's asking his fellow kinsmen to be obedient to the kingdom regulations. So the answer here, were the disciples of the apostles saved to the kingdom, or were they eventually saved by grace? I'm going to say, for those who lived long enough, the answer is probably yes. Yes, they will eventually be saved into the kingdom. They will inherit the kingdom promises and the covenant promises that are theirs. But they also, before their death, were able to enjoy the grace promises that are theirs. And so it's this, again, a little bit of an overlap. Now, some people have a problem with the overlap. Some people say, no, you can't do that. If you're going to divide these, of course, the vast majority of Christianity does not even recognize there was a kingdom of the gospel that is separate from the kingdom of grace. You and I, right dividers, certainly want to make that distinction, but some don't have the overlap. I think that if you do away with the overlap because you can't answer some of the questions about where was Peter and which gospel and, the apostles and how, it brings a little bit of speculation. And so you say, no, I don't want to speculate. I'm doing away with that and I'm putting them back to back. The problem is you've just traded one set of problems for another set of problems, and the other set of problems is probably even more difficult and brings about more confusion than the problem of the overlap. So I choose to accept, okay, I can't understand everything about this overlap. just because it wasn't revealed. We can't know what we don't know. And it was not revealed by God to us. We can see it together. As a matter of fact, if we go to Galatians chapter 2, verse 7, it says, contrariwise, when they saw that the gospel of the uncircumcision was committed to me as the gospel of the circumcision was committed to Peter. That definitively says there's an overlap. Both of these gospels, that of the circumcision, that of the uncircumcision, that of Paul, that of Peter, that of Paul, that of kingdom, that of mystery, that of law, that of grace. These were things that were going on at the same time. So like I said, if you dismiss the issues because you have the challenges of not knowing some of the things, I think you just add to your problems and all that. And that brings about confusion, and confusion brings about manipulation too many times. Thanks, Linda in Lexington, for the question. Appreciate you being here with us. And let's go to Rudy in Belgium, Lessines, Belgium, who has a question that comes... It's a Bible-based question, and of course we take biblical, theological, and worldview questions. And this one comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 12, compared to 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1. The question is, how do you explain the difference between 1 Corinthians 1:12, a reproach from Paul, and 1 Corinthians 11:1, an encouragement to follow him? 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 12. Now this I say, every one of you saith, I am of Paul, I am of Apollos, I am of Cephas, I am of Christ. You're exactly right. This is a reproach from Paul. Shame on you, he says, for coming together in these various coalitions and not coming together under proper theology here. And there was some problems, I don't know, shall you say denominational problems that came about here. But then you take that and 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1, of course, says, be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Christ. These are things that don't seem to go together, right? Shame on you for saying I am of Paul. Now, I want you to say I am of Paul. Well, that's obviously a contradiction. What do you do when you deal with contradictions? We looked at this briefly. This would have been a good example in our recent class on hermeneutics, as we were talking about what to do with contradictions in probably the 11th or the 12th session of the Guide to Hermeneutics. And in that, one of the things that we said is maybe it's a contextual issue, not an underlying textual issue, not a translational issue, but rather a context issue. My guess, if we were to look in this, let's go again to 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 12, and here is again this chastisement to those of you who say, I am of Paul, I am of Apollos, I am of Cephas, I am of Christ. Is Christ divided? Was Paul crucified? Were ye baptized in the name of Paul? That really, when you put that together, he really is kind of saying, don't be Pauline, if you will. And then, again, he comes back in the same book and says, follow me. You follow me, I'll follow Christ. I think you have to take the more immediate context of chapter 1, the introduction to the letter, and of chapter 11, obviously deep into the meat of the matter here, and probably we would look at it and say, the problem is, in a sense, it's a problem of not rightly dividing. It's an issue of needing to come together and be together in the whole of theology, in order to understand the parts of theology. And he was saying to them at the beginning, you all are divided up into these little tiny parts and you're missing the whole. And Paul comes then later, bridging some of that gap, and then comes and says, okay, now I want you to follow me, as now you know where we are. Where does Christ fit into this? Where does... and of course, in a couple of chapters, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, he's going to talk about Christ and the completed work of Christ being the very basis of Pauline theology. So, can you really say, I follow Paul, I don't need Christ? Well, Paul would say, anathema, God forbid. How in the world could you take that which is built upon the foundation of Christ and do away with Christ? Same way with those who say, I believe it was Pastor Andy Stanley in Georgia who famously said we need to unhitch ourselves from the Old Testament. Well, from a dispensational point of view, you maybe say, okay, he's trying to say that we're not hitched, you and I, to the Old Testament. We're under a different dispensation. And yet at the same time, as you look more into his ministry and whatnot, it looks more like he's saying, ditch the Old Testament rather than unhitch yourself. Well, anathema, God forbid. How in the world are you ever going to understand anything in the New Testament without what we call the Old Testament? Can't do it. So I suspect this becomes this contextual issue in the very narrow context of chapter 1 versus chapter 11. Excellent catch there in bringing up these, shall we say, contradictions and looking at that through there. Excellent. I appreciate it. San Antonio, Texas says, I know that Paul struggled with sin, but why do we continue to struggle with sin even though God is not imputing our trespasses? Thanks. Good to see you again. Thank you. I appreciate that and the time off I had. Now, Paul did struggle with sin. We read about that in Romans chapter 7. There's a great debate, theological debate in the broader circles about Romans chapter 7, about whether or not that was Paul talking about his, shall we call it the pre-Christian life versus the post-Christian life. There are those in the denominational worlds that some believe in progressive sanctification and progressing all the way to the place where you are now having a sinless life. You come to a sinless perfection. There is the holiness movement that is built upon that concept. And so the holiness movement has to look at, and those who adopt the holiness movement in various degrees as well, they have to take Romans chapter 7, oh wretched man that I am, and say, well, that was Paul back then, and he's sort of slowly dealing with this. But I think it's safe to say, no, Paul was talking about his life then and there, and that Paul did have this struggle with sin. He even receives, the messenger from Satan to buffet me, to keep me from exalting myself, that I should glory beyond measure, which would be a possibility for someone who's, had a visit to the third heavens and seen things that have been kept secret from the time the ages began. You might want to sell tickets and have people line up for the autograph. You could begin to gloat, right? So Paul did struggle with sin. You and I struggle with sin. But God is not imputing our trespasses against us. Now, that's from 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 19. We could look at it and we could say, well, let's quit the struggle. If he's not imputing our trespasses against us, let's just, if it feels good, do it. Make that our mantra and live that way. However, I think that we would certainly have to say we struggle with sin because we are people with a free will. Even saved, we are people with a free will. God does not remove our free will. Of course, the whole Calvinist world rejects completely the idea of a free will, but I accept the idea of the free will. And so the reason we struggle with sin is we've got the free will. Now, let's take Adam and Eve in the garden. We're going to make up a scenario here. Are we accurate in this scenario? I don't know, but let's go ahead and make it up. Adam and Eve are in the garden, and they get onto each other's nerves. And, it's can't you go on vacation somewhere? And they say some things to each other that really should not have been said. And maybe they call each other bad names. You know, Snuffleupagus, Madam Talk-a-Lot, whatever it is. You know, get out of here. I'm sick and tired of you. And they are offensive to one another. Is that being held against them? No, it's not. Let's just even push this a little bit further. Let's suppose that Adam is frolicking in the woods one day and he trips over a log and skins his knee. Now, I don't know what the physical characteristics were in that day, whether this could have been a possibility or not, but he skins his knee. And when he does, he makes up a cuss word. And Adam speaks the first cuss word. Is it held against him? No, it's not held against him. How do I know? Because there was only one prohibition given. This is your place. You can do whatever you want with it. Just don't eat from that tree. So only one trespass would be held against him. Everything else, you know, it's free and open. Go for it. Do it if you want to. But Adam also walks with God in the cool of the day. And so he knows what honors God, what pleases God, what thrills God. And he's appreciative. And so, you know, maybe he comes later and says, oh, wish I hadn't ever created that word. Wish I hadn't ever said that to my wife, this gift that God has given to me. And he says, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to try to. I think we live much in the same kind of world in which you and I are not bound by the regulations of the law. And I know there are some out there who say, no, we are bound by the regulations of the law. And to that person, I would say, you're doing a lousy job living up to them. Bacon for breakfast and all that kind of stuff. We don't live up to the law. We don't even attempt to live up to the law for the most part. But those of us who live under grace say, okay, I'm free from the law. God's not holding my trespasses against me. But I'm going to be face to face with Jesus someday. And in the meantime, I want to honor him. I want to please him. He's not, I'm not who was the president of Princeton that had the famous sermon, sinners in the hands of an angry God. That's not the picture of the world today. It's a Calvinist make-believe picture of the world today, but it's not the picture of the world today. And so, as one who's not sinner in the hand of an angry God, again, do I just go out and throw caution to the wind and live free and easy? No. I want to honor the Lord. So our struggle with sin is a struggle between, I don't know, shall we say, being Christ-like and being Randy-like. How's that? And what I want is more of him and less of me. What I want is people to look at me and only see a reflection of God, not to look at me and see a, grumbling old bald-headed man who's wandering into sin. That's not the picture I want to give. I want a picture that is a wonderful witness for God who has given me a salvation through Jesus Christ. So I think our struggle with sin is there. It is again not a struggle that, hey, I might lose my salvation or I might not have ever been saved to begin with. Those concepts go against, just in its very definition, they go against the idea of being saved by grace through faith, not of works. So God has given to me a gift. Now I really want to try to do something that honors him with it, and that expands his cause. That was Jonathan Edwards with Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. Thanks for those in the live audience helping me out there. And you know that sermon, Sinners in the Hand of an Angry God, of course, affected a generation, really. I think we could say affected generations from that point on. And it comes from an Old Testament idea and an Old Testament concept. It fails to recognize what God has done in Christ and the gift that he is offering today, which we know of by the Apostle Paul. It fails to recognize any of that, and therein it goes awry and goes wrong, and therein we have the challenge that we deal with through all of that. I appreciate that. Lisa in Moundridge, Kansas, has a question that relates to Genesis chapter 16. The angel of the Lord told Hagar that the name of her son shall be Ishmael. But who told Abram? Now, the reason that this comes about is that we see in Genesis chapter 16 here that she conceived, and they met out in the wilderness. And here's the story that goes through Genesis chapter 16. She called upon the name of the Lord. He spoke to her. And actually, even just a few verses earlier, the angel of the Lord told Hagar, "You will bear a son, and you shall name him Ishmael," in words that are very, very similar to Gabriel's announcement to Mary. That which is conceived in you is of the Holy Ghost. You will bring forth a son. You will call his name Jesus, for it is he who will save his people from their sins. In Genesis chapter 16, verse 11, the angel of the Lord said unto her, "Behold, thou art with child, and shalt bear a son, and shalt call his name Ishmael, because the Lord hath heard thy affliction." Ishmael means God hears. The Lord has heard thy affliction. Now, they're out in the wilderness, and told this. Now then, you pick up, and it speaks some against him, and goes on, and down in verse 14, in verse 16, Hagar bare Abram a son, and Abram called his son's name, which Hagar bare, Ishmael. And he was 86 years old, 86 years old, when all of this took place. Now, how does Abram know to call his name Ishmael? The answer is, I don't know. So, can I speculate just a little bit? In the speculation of this, I would say the scriptures don't tell us everything. Obviously, if they did, was it the Gospel of John who said, so many other things happened. If all of them were written down, the world wouldn't hold the books. And so there are some things that take place that are not recorded, and we have to kind of connect the dots. I wonder how many times we connected the wrong dots, or we came up with the wrong speculation. I don't have a problem with connecting dots. The only problem I have is when you build a doctrine on it and you begin to go and say, well, this is where we're going to stop. This is where it's going to be. This is right, and never question the assumptions again. I have a gift that was just given to me right there. Reminds me to question the assumptions. And so we're going to make an assumption here. And by the way, those who learn to question the assumptions get used to verbalizing their assumptions, saying, hey, here's the Achilles heel. Everything's going to rest on here. My assumption would be that Hagar comes back into the home, and there's a little bbit about that in Genesis chapter 16, and she tells Abram, let me tell you what happened while I was out there. I'm going to bear a son, and the angel of the Lord told me to name him Ishmael, but hey, it's your job to actually give the name, Abram. And so Abram comes and shows his obedience to the word of the Lord, even though he didn't hear it directly. He certainly had heard from the Lord before, and so he comes into this and hears the word of the Lord, and he names him. Now, again, that would be my assumption. So question the assumptions, and it would be interesting and I think valuable at times to go back and say, well, what could the other possibilities be? Maybe the angel of the Lord came and spoke to Abram as well. And perhaps you could build that argument, though it's not in the scripture. We know that the Lord sent Gabriel to speak to Mary. You'll call his name Jesus. And then Joseph, the earthly father of our Lord, had the vision also. And that vision was, hey, she's going to bring forth a child. It's of the Holy Ghost. And you are going to call his name Jesus because it is he who will save their people from their sins. A number of scenarios we could give. Which one is it exactly? I don't know. This is one of those fortunate ones in probably which a doctrine doesn't rest upon it. But I think in order to really study the Word well, we have to try to fill in the blanks. Because that's going to affect our understanding of the whole passage. Thanks, Lisa, in Moundridge, Kansas, for that question. I appreciate it. This is Ask the Theologian. I'm Dr. Randy White. You can catch a full hour of broadcast at randywhiteministries.org, live 10 a.m. every morning, Mountain Time. And thank you. We are back. Those were good questions. By the way, that looks nice, doesn't it? Roger made that for me. And, not only is it nice because it says question the assumptions, but because this 2x4 right here, it's a 2x4, the old style, when we didn't lie about 2x4s. And this came from when we did some platform remodel. It's one of the original boards of the church there, question the assumption. And, it's even got Roger's name in the back. I didn't notice that earlier. That's nice. I like that. And furthermore, I can use it when someone doesn't question the assumptions. I can knock some sense into them. So this is a multi-purpose board here. A little paperweight, a little illustration, and a board of common sense. Thanks, Roger. I appreciate that. Let's see. Will that go? I can't. There. How's that? Thanks. Good to see you all. Okay, let's go down to Corsicana, Texas. Our friend Randy down there. Oh, I bet Corsicana is busy these days with the fruitcakes going out in Corsicana, home of the world famous something or another fruitcake. I never can remember the name. Don't send me one. Who likes? Let's take a poll here. Who likes fruitcake? Roger likes fruitcake. But Carol's with me. So it's 2-1 here in the studio. Cliff, I like that. I can use it to take out the camera when it's out of focus. Boom. There we go. Fix that. There we go. Nancy compliments you on the board. And they'd like to start selling them at $19.95 a piece. I made that part up, but anyway. Sorry, Randy. Here we go to the Corsicana question today, and that is, I have a supposition. By the way, a supposition, a presupposition, an assumption, is there another word for it? All of these are the same thing, so here we go with a supposition. But Linda says fruitcakes are nasty. Emphasis on the A there. And Deb does not like fruitcake, and Nancy does not like fruitcake, and Shirley says, yuck, fruitcake. So, Roger, you're going to end up with lots of fruitcakes if they start coming in. We're sending them your way. I don't know, but I grew up in the 70s, of course, and in the 70s they had, remember when Grandma used to use the Aquanet? The Aquanet would likely hold ships together if they were to break apart on the sea. Just spray some Aquanet on there. And if you went in the bathroom after Grandma put on the Aquanet, you breathed it, you tasted it. And fruitcake kind of tastes like Aquanet to me. It's those little fruit things. Which, are they even fruit? I don't know. Even Randy is not into fruitcakes. And Joel says they do make good paperweights. They last forever. That is true. Oh, Bev comes in to rescue the day for the fruitcake company. Dark fruitcake is heavenly, she says. Heavenly.
Who's that?
This is Bev, St. Croix County, Wisconsin.
I'm with Bev.
Bev and Roger are going to have a party. Lisa's no on the fruitcake. Oh, yeah. Roger is officially on the board of Randy White Ministries. Edith, I eat almost anything, including fruitcake. I would have to be hungry, and usually what I would do is skip the little Aquanet balls. Just the cake. But it's not my favorite either. Oh, thank you for the name. Collins Street Bakery. I was trying to come up with it there. And they do sell fruitcakes all over the world. So, Stephen, you win the day. He says, I like fruitcakes, but I don't like liberal fruitcake policies. I like those little square fruitcakes sold in the store, maybe not homemade fruitcakes. Chuck, fruitcake is rotten. Yeah, Nancy, I agree. The candied fruit ruins the cake. Cake is good, but the candied fruit, I have to say to you, I'll get to the question here in a moment. I have to say, I am not a fan of nuts in cake. I know that is kind of, I made all these friends with being anti-fruit cake, but now you say, I don't even like nuts in cake. I prefer my cake to just be cake. I don't want nuts in it. I don't want coconut in it. I don't want cherries in it. Not even pudding. You know, some people put pudding in the cake. I just want my cake to be cake. That's what I want. I love just a plain yellow cake with chocolate frosting. That's a good cake. Oh, Beb says put some green chili on it. Yeah, that might do it. That might do it. Okay, if you're in Corsicana, Collins Street Bakery is the place, and Randy says they have a great coffee shop. So if y'all go down to Corsicana, Roger, you can get some fruitcake, and Carol, you can get some coffee. And she doesn't drink coffee. Okay, here we go. Now, Jennifer. Now, Jennifer's young, up in Yakult, Washington. And but young fruitcakes used to be more popular, wouldn't you say? Back in the day, I don't know why they were popular. It's just, I think they were hand-me-downs. But she says, I don't even think I've tried fruitcakes. Looks too gross to even try. It is kind of a, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. It's sort of like reindeer throw up, all in a cake. There we go. Okay, let's get to the question here. Oh, yeah. Deb put a link up with some pictures that you can almost smell the Aquanet. Yeah. Janie says, agree with the majority. Fruitcake is creepy. Creepy. That's Hallie's new word. You know, my little 2-year-old granddaughter. She, for some reason, a lot of things are creepy now. Ooh, that's creepy. So, yeah, let's go with that. Okay, now let's get, that is because Randy's from Corsicana. I have a supposition. Do you think that Paul's epistles were sent to the synagogues first and then dispersed to the Gentile believers? It seems that most, if not all, were written to Jewish leaders, and then later the epistles were for the Gentiles. Ephesians 1:1, for example, he says to the saints and then to the faithful in Christ. And you know the rest of the pronouns and how they are used. That is an interesting supposition, which might have some of there might be some strength to it on some of the epistles. I think I just pulled up Galatians here, in which he says, unto the churches of Galatia. I don't think he's talking about the synagogues there. I think that he there is talking about Gentile believers. But it's questionable whether or not there even were strong synagogues, or if Paul had ever been to any of the synagogues in Galatia, that there may have only been churches there. But you think about Ephesus, Thessalonica, Corinth. These are all places that had a very strong Jewish contingent. Philippi didn't. Remember, this is where Lydia met for a place of prayer, and looks like there was not a minyan, enough men to make a synagogue there. So I would say on the, can we make up a word on the synagoguean epistles of Paul? Maybe we should divide them. There's the synagoguean epistles, and there's the Gentilian epistles. And I think you could probably argue decently. Again, I don't know that you could ever, be definitive about it. But some of this is a good way of being, again, of looking through and saying, let me try to get some more insight out of this. Here's sort of what I like to do. Make a supposition like this. And for here, let's take Ephesus. So our supposition is Paul wrote to the synagogue in Ephesus. The believers of the synagogue took it, and others, then later they sent it on to the Gentiles. Now, would that add any, does that add any insights? And it might. I mean, right offhand, we might say, nah, I think the letter is the letter. But it might add some insights into it. And then we could back up and say, okay, now I'm going to go at this from a different assumption. I'm going to go at this from the sense that he wrote completely to the Gentiles there, and try that one. I think that one we would run into some challenges before we finished it up. But I think your assumption, at least for those synagoguean epistles, which would be the 2 Corinthians, would be the 2 Thessalonians, it would be Ephesians, and probably Romans. I think you and what is that? That's 6 at least. You got the individual ones, obviously, that doesn't even fit the assumption of the question. So those church epistles, singular church epistles, probably got a good point there. The only one would be Philemon, which is written not only to Philemon, but also to the church that meets in his home. That's clearly not a synagogue. And it's a little more, it wouldn't be considered one of the church epistles. So on the church epistles, you very likely have a very good assumption there. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Let's see. Cliff has a question. Is Oscar Woodall's book, Journey from Law to Grace, worth a read? Let's see what we can find out about it. And see, by the way, if there are any of you who have read the book, chime in here and let me know what you find out. I want to make sure I'm getting the right one here before yeah, here we go. Okay. So this may be an older book. I'm going to go to my favorite place to look up older books, and that is archive.org. And here on archive.org, their search thing is odd. You want to skip this one at the top, the Wayback Machine, go down to this bottom where it says search. And let's put Oscar M. Woodall and see if we come up with anything. No, I don't see that. Okay, so let me try this different. Oscar Woodall, Journey from Law to Grace. Here we go. Well, it says nothing about it. How about that? Let's go here on the one website that I don't really like to go. It says nothing about it. Okay. I'm going to have to do some work here and see what I can figure out. Okay, so Joel, I hinted that somebody might know, and I suspected Joel McGarvey. If anybody would know, it would be Joel McGarvey. So he says, I believe Woodall's books were self-published. He was an ex-Baptist who became a mid-acts dispensationalist. Well, he must be a good guy then. Speaking of that, do I still have it up here? I'm not sure I do. I don't. I watched just this morning a little clip by Ruckman, Peter Ruckman. And, of course, Ruckman, people loved him or people hated him. The more I read about Ruckman, the more I love him. And his clip was on the book of James. Ruckman, yeah, okay, here, I've got it. I would play it for you here, but my sound's not coming over right now. So, but let's see if we can pull up the transcript here, because maybe they come from the same sort here. Sorry, I wasn't showing you. Yeah, okay. Oh, well, this has got the transcript in Portuguese or something like that, so we don't want that. But what he says in it is James was not written to Christians. And he says, you know, there are 9,000, 9 million, I don't remember, he pulls a number out of there, 9 million teachers out there try to make James written to Christians. It wasn't written to Christians. Don't they know? And what he says is, James, he holds to the James the Apostle as the author rather than James the brother of our Lord. And I think there's some decent arguments there. But what he says is, you know, James was dead before Paul ever came along. How in the world could he be writing to Christians? Peter Ruckman recognized that Christianity as we know it begins with Paul. Now he was an odd mix because he also had some sermons that were very anti-mid-acts or hyper-dispensational. He used to call them the dry cleaners. You know, they're dry cleaning Baptists because they don't baptize. And he did believe in baptism. But, you know, honestly, he got most of his theology right. So, you know, could that be that Woodall is the same, an ex-Baptist who became a mid-acts dispensationalist? Goes on, Joel says, if it matters to the reader, he was a King James Version only person, which is probably true of every Baptist-styled mid-acts person, I would guess. They come from the King James only camp, which maybe the reason they're so strongly King James only is because they learned mid-Acts dispensationalism through reading a King James, and then they recognize you can't get that out of the others. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? It's hard to tell there, but nonetheless. So I tell you what, I'm going to, Cliff, I'm going to leave the question up here for just a moment and see if I can find some more information on it. Joel, do you know, is he still alive? And I'm wondering if he was a Ruckmanite, the follower of Peter Ruckman. And if he was a Ruckmanite, perhaps he teaches very much the same as Peter Ruckman. That's what made the connection there, because Ruckman, of course, a Baptist, a Baptist, mostly right divider, very strongly King James only kind of guy. But he's got some good notes out there through that. So I'm going to leave the question, see if we can come up with that. Okay. I'm out of time. We had some fun today talking through it. I don't know that I got that many questions done, but it's good to be back in the desk, and I'll be here all week long. And tomorrow night, we've got the book of Hosea. And Thursday night, the book of Romans, and we're going to question the assumptions all week, and we're going to answer your questions. And feel free to submit those questions if you're chatting right now on YouTube. Use the word question first. If you're on Worshipify, you can put in the put in your question and submit as a question will help us, or you can always go to askthetheologian.com. A blessing to be with you here. You know, I just remember that this is Giving Tuesday. That's a Hallmark holiday, or something that some PR firm made up for nonprofits. But if you're looking for a place to give on Giving Tuesday, we always appreciate it. 100% of our income comes from fellas like you, folks like us who just try to rightly divide and want to keep things going. RandyWhiteMinistries.org. You can find the donate button there, and I appreciate all of you very much. Look forward again to being with you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Happy birthday, Carol. Glad you spent your birthday with us. If any of the rest of you have a birthday out there, let us know. We'll send you a fruitcake. God bless. We'll see y'all soon.